What's fascinating about video games as a medium is its capacity to articulate story on experiential terms, moving a character down a claustrophobic corridor with a controller rather than just watching someone do it in a movie has completely different effects, because the mode of address is different, new meanings are pronounced. And in the Arkham trilogy, Batman is deconstructed through his relationship with the stage. And a question is then asked by placing the player into these premises. How do you identify with these different worlds?
The psycho with a master plan of his own.
Hans Blumenberg once said the modern age was the first and only age that understood itself as an epoch, and in doing so simultaneously created the other epochs. In other words, progress and change was never a feature in pre-modern society because it was only through technology that humanity could orientate itself forwards. And throughout fiction, there's a tendency to explore the odd friction that exists between people and the rapid development of society. So on a sociological level, Arkham Asylum is effectively used as a representative of modernity because it's rooted in mankind's attempt to understand the science of people and to create progress for the rest of society.
I'd been studying Joker's case for months when he broke out. The warden was very specific he wanted Joker cured.
Bad publicity will affect his campaign for mayor.
This entire process is highlighted and dismantled when the Joker takes over the whole place immediately. The same system of hierarchical organization exists, but now the inmates and those in charge are flipped.
I got a kid. You don't have...
So the identity of the asylum and the name Arkham as a unit of identity is defined and established as a broken dream, a vision of how modernity could have benefited people but is made dysfunctional because not everyone can fit into it, which is made apparent during the last Scarecrow sequence where Joker is playable and Batman is the inmate. It's not the structures, it's the people who inhabit them. The asylum effectively becomes a microcosm of the wider world of Gotham City. As in foremost, the story is presented as mundane as possible. It's just another breakout, another day taking Joker back. The player's imagination doesn't have any trouble constructing what the world looks like outside of the asylum walls. The long walk in the beginning is used to establish and anchor a cyclical logic to this world, because every line alludes to the previous breakout.
Killed 3 of my crew when you busted out of here.
Only 3? I'll be sure to try harder next time. What say we aim for 100?
Every interview tape is characterized by the inability to institutionalize the minds of the villains. Gordon leaving and then getting captured again. The Metroid gameplay logic where you unlock new places with new gadgets, but it's always the same map. To Batman, beating the Joker and then going off to fight Two-Face marks this whole occasion as just being another event in his evening. This is a world trapped in a repetitious cycle with little development despite all the resources made from modernity. As a result, the Joker by nature is symbolically turned into a question. Is society one of failure? Because the outcome is always the same. But on the other hand, it can also be understood that this cycle is one of romance.
You've ingested enough toxins to drive 10 men insane! What are you?
Where cooperation and heroic agency is also a powerful outcome that is produced from all of this. And that's what's interesting about the vicarious nature of video games. After spending 4 hours going after the Joker, what do you feel when you take him in? Whatever it is, that's the answer to this thematic ultimatum. Arkham City further interrogates this theme by escalating the situation and the forces at play, because now the traditional but decaying system of a mental institution has been expanded into a completely insane city block, where the social ecosystem introduced in Asylum is left to thrive independently. On one side you've got the Joker, Penguin and Two-Face, who runs the system with their gangs, and on the other side you have Tiger Security Forces that manages this entire environment with Protocol 10, the destruction of all criminal life. The friction between modernity and people has been exacerbated. Arkham City is way more direct than Arkham Asylum because it tries to resolve some of the themes. From inception, Arkham City was never a place that was designed to be sustainable. The Wonder City underground section that you spend almost the entire second act in works as a metaphor for this inevitable implosion in modernity. It's marketed as a dream of a better place that is destroyed and turned into a ruin.
Grow to resemble hell breaking through the sidewalk, continuing up into the sky. Structures will grow to blot out the sun, and the people who live in them will be choked by the pollution they create.
And this answer of obsolescence is carried by everything in Arkham City. Batman himself is dying from Joker's blood. Protocol 10 was financed because Ra's was becoming impatient of the world's lack of improvement. Mr. Freeze wants to save Nora. The Joker is dying. Time and identity are the two key concepts that drives the story. Where Arkham Asylum saw modernity as a cycle, Arkham City sees it as being unsustainable, which is a deeply bleak message because now it contextualizes Batman as a participant rather than a solution. Even when you stop Protocol 10, you don't stop the Joker from killing Talia, or even his death. The different pillars of the society, for better or worse, is destined for collapse, so when Batman walks off into the night saddened by these events, it's also him recognizing the inevitability of all of this. He loses the woman he loves, a ton of people are dead, and his moment of doubt contributes to the death of his enemy. His moral prestige and capabilities are starting to decay too. But this is also a video game where once you finish the story, they give you the ability to return and tie up any unfinished side quests and do some more Riddler stuff, which does end up slightly giving it a more optimistic note because even in the advent of societal and emotional decay, Batman is still standing. So that's at least one foundational pillar that not only is willing to stand, but will carry on into eternity. And since we play as him, we are this pillar. We become the answer, the monument to this theme. Now we shift gears literally with the Batmobile. Oh my god, that was a pretty terrible pun. Arkham City was the beginning of the end, and before Arkham Knight properly begins, the end is here. Batman has to save a city that's doomed before the game even allows you to control him. The only people that are left are the criminals, or as Gordon puts it,
The only people left on the streets are the sort that enjoy the chaos.
which on one hand is pretty clear, it's the technical limitations of design and hardware, but it also makes the story more thematically naked. This is a revelation in a way, in the sense that Gotham has now turned out to have had more criminals than civilians in it. It's not just structural decay, the quality of people have eroded too. And it goes back to the first game's premise of having the inmates running the asylum, but now it's the criminals becoming the new order. And the only opposition left is Batman, so on one hand you can view him as an institution in himself, representing traditional civil order in a lawless place, or you could perceive him as an agent of chaos fighting against a new system. He is to Gotham as Joker was to the asylum.
Oh, don't act all surprised, Bats. You knew this was going to happen sooner or later. He's stuck deep inside you.
Therefore, the friction between humanity and modernity isn't placed within an asylum or a city block. This is a friction manifested within the self, inside a man. Is Batman a person, or is he an idea? Is he a relatable human being, or is he a transcendent symbol that is more than just flesh and blood? The ideal result of modernity internalized. And this contest of interpretation is placed within the perspective of us. Our job as the player is to win, so Batman is made unstoppable. one-man army who can manage the drama and conflict of an entire city populated literally by an army, so he intrinsically has a foot in the artistically abstract. But at the same time, this is challenged by the fact that in the story he makes a series of really bad decisions, not telling Tim Barbara's supposed death, telling Gordon about everything, Bruce keeping the Joker patients in holding cells illegally. Joker's blood messes with Batman to the point that his own humanity becomes his weakness. So the gameplay is effectively telling you one thing and the story is telling you another, which could easily be brushed off as being a result of a bad case of ludonarrative dissonance, but it could also be understood as Rocksteady experimenting with the medium, because throughout the game they're constantly articulating story through completely experiential logics, like all the different transitions that happen when you look away and then look back, or the first person segments, or the insane amount of Easter eggs that help pronounce different aspects of the story. To convey the central conflict, they made the experience of the whole game feel oddly conflicted. At least, that's what I tell myself anyway.
Do you not understand? It is over.
Get ready for the encore.
Anyways, Jason Todd as the Arkham Knight is a figment, a symbol representing the friction in Batman's sense of identity. Because in this continuity, Jason isn't mad that Batman didn't kill the Joker, but he's mad that Batman had dehumanized him into a soldier and then replaced him after his death.
Just like Bats and that new kid of his.
No, you wouldn't.
He feels like he's been used and disposed of. It wasn't a very good reveal at the time, but it does an interesting job for the purpose of the story in hindsight, because it turns Batman into the setting of the story. Now he's being implicated with the failure of the system. Furthermore, this is spotlighted by the Joker's appearance as a being existing in Batman's psychology, because despite representing opposing ideals between chaos and order, they're still connected by the same attitude, a same level of transgression. And Jason is a victim from his own lack of relevance in Batman's weird romantic world. So before Batman even enters the truck and surrenders to Scarecrow at the end, you can tell this is the tipping point where Batman has to give up what's left of his humanity for his mission.
She needs a new myth. A legend more powerful than I can be right now. A legend that can only rise from the ashes of the Batman.
The answer it conceives to solving the friction between humanity and modernity is to solve the friction in the self. And the game tries to resolve some of the moral implications of this perspective by giving Gordon this pretty in-your-face speech at the end. As Batman's world got darker, so did our world.
As his world grew darker, so did ours. When his war ended, our lives could begin again.
So the preferred reading of Batman's ruthless abandonment of his own emotional authorship is to understand it as a selfless act. The only way to protect the people he cares about from becoming victims of his own ruthless practicality is to distance himself from them. So when the final super abstract image of the scary bat looming over Gotham appears, it's also him leaving us, the player, behind too, because by not knowing truly what the meaning of his fate is, or if this image is literal or not, we finally leave his vicarious world behind. There are many ways to unpack the various ideas mapped out in this trilogy, from security, technology, identity theory, the sociology of power, but I'm more interested in the theme of fear and modernity, because each game has very different perspectives on time. In Arkham Asylum, it's more or less saying the development of society is one that has no end because it's constantly being reset, pushed on by Batman's never-ending war on crime and Joker's never-ending war against authority. In Arkham City, there is a destination. Gotham is destined to become like Wonder City, a ruin where technology and humane intentions do little against the indifference of fate. And in Arkham Knight, it views time not being rooted in the environment but in identification, something that is deeply internal. And the resolution is that a happy ending only happens when the self is reconciled.
You're afraid of being ashes. You're afraid of being forgotten. And you will be forgotten, Joker. Because of me.
As Frank Furedi said, today's intellectual pessimism and cultural disorientation serves to distract the human imagination from confronting the challenges that lie ahead. Alarmist accounts about human survival expresses a crisis of belief in humanity. That is why the real question at stake is not whether humanity will survive, but whether or not our belief in humanity can survive the 21st century. Modernity has made people less dependent on each other, so the capacity to trust in some feeling of harmony is something that's been largely deteriorated. And the Arkham Trilogy doesn't view this erosion with a sense of nostalgic longingness to return to something old-fashioned, like an old vision of community and structural intimacy. It views this lack of faith as an epoch for something greater, the creation of a new individual who can persevere even in the face of loneliness.